My cousin falsely accused me, stole my college fund, wasted it on reckless choices. And now my family begs me to stay silent as she faces her deathbed. Jade, who is 4 years older than me, and I used to be close when we were kids, but we grew apart over time. She's my uncle's daughter, and my uncle, my mom's younger brother, is a single father. He married his ex-wife when they were young because she got pregnant, but she cheated on him, and their marriage ended within a couple of years. She tried to stay in touch with Jade for a while, but eventually moved away with her new boyfriend, cutting off all contact. My uncle, a respectable man, dedicated his life to raising Jade alone, never accepting help from anyone. It was admirable how he poured everything into her, even setting aside a college fund, without ever getting serious with anyone else after his divorce. When Jade turned 18, her father told her he'd done all he could to fund her education, but now she'd need to support herself for higher studies, as he had to plan for his retirement. I thought this was fair. She was old enough to work and take responsibility, but Jade disagreed, believing her dad should keep funding her education indefinitely, whether for a master's degree or a doctorate. This led to frequent fights, and she often came to our house to vent to my mom. I thought my uncle was being reasonable, but since Jade was talking to my mom and not me, I stayed out of it. One day, Jade showed up unannounced, as she often did, while my parents were out, probably at a party. I was home alone and told her my mom wasn't there, expecting her to leave. Instead, she stayed in the living room, saying she needed time away from her father after another big fight. I'd heard enough about their arguments, as she was loud when venting to my mom, and I wasn't interested in hearing more. But since my mom wasn't there, she started ranting to me, expecting the same sympathy my mom gave her. I had a different view. When she complained about her father, I cut her off and said my mom might feed into her delusions, but I thought my uncle was right. He'd raised her to be competent and independent, and now was her chance to prove it. If she wanted a master's or doctorate as a STEM major, she could work and pay for it like everyone else. I told her if she'd already decided working and studying was too hard, maybe she should give up on higher studies, but it was unfair to demand her father keep paying, especially after all he'd done. She wasn't grateful. She acted like he was the villain. Jade didn't take my reality check well. She yelled, called me a horrible person, and said I'd never understand her struggles, because I was a privileged brat who didn't deserve my family's support. Honestly, I thought she was the privileged one, but I didn't chase her when she ran out crying. I wasn't interested in her repetitive complaints. What I didn't expect was what came next. The following day, Jade accused me of sexually assaulting her, and my life unraveled. That morning, my parents woke me up, saying my uncle and Jade were there for an important matter. It's still vivid, the most traumatizing day of my life. Downstairs, Jade was screaming about how I'd assaulted her the previous night, faking a breakdown. My uncle looked disturbed, my parents shocked. Since she was too upset to talk, my uncle explained that after their fight, Jade came to our house, and since my parents weren't home, I'd allegedly lured her in and assaulted her. He couldn't even look at me, nor could my parents. I protested, insisting it wasn't true, but no one listened. It was horrific, treated like a criminal despite being innocent. My parents begged my uncle not to report me or go public, offering to do anything to fix it. They ignored my pleas, discussing me like I wasn't there. Out of frustration, I threw a vase at the wall to get their attention, but it backfired. My dad lost his temper, grabbed my arm, dragged me to my room, and locked me in. I banged on the door until my fists hurt, desperate not to let Jade's lie ruin my reputation. When my dad finally let me out after they left, I cried and swore I hadn't done anything, but they said they'd seen security footage showing Jade arriving and running out crying minutes later. They believed her, saying she had no reason to lie, and were ashamed of the son they'd raised. My mom was in tears, unable to speak, but my dad said they'd convinced my uncle and Jade not to take legal action, on one condition: I'd be sent far away so Jade wouldn't have to see me and relive her trauma. After much discussion, my dad decided to send me to my great-uncle in Iowa, a family member I disliked for his terrible attitude and anger issues. They also gave Jade my college fund to keep her quiet. I tried to protest, but they wouldn't listen. I gave up, realizing even my parents didn't trust me. I figured Jade made the accusation to manipulate my parents into giving her money, knowing her father wouldn't accept financial help. Within days, I was packed and sent off. My parents didn't hug me or say goodbye, treating me like I didn't exist. They took my phone, threatening to ruin my reputation if I didn't go off the grid. I was forced to cut ties with everyone, family, friends, and move away because of Jade's lie. Living with my great-uncle was tough. He taunted me constantly, despite not knowing why I was sent away, and acted like he was doing me a favor. Even though my parents sent him money after a few weeks, I decided to stop moping. Since my college plans were ruined, I'd been accepted but had no funds. I started job hunting. After several interviews, I landed a warehouse job. It was physically draining and paid little, but it was a start. I made friends with 2 coworkers my age, also struggling financially. We became close and pooled our money to rent an apartment, allowing me to escape my great-uncle's house without even telling him. For 3 years, I had no contact with my family or old friends. My roommates and I changed jobs often, seeking better opportunities, as the warehouse work was exhausting. We saved money, all dreaming of college. I now work in sales, earning decently, and have been considering reapplying to colleges. My roommates are also doing well, and we've moved into a bigger apartment in a nicer neighborhood. Just as things were looking up, my family tried to re-enter my life. A few days ago, my dad emailed me the first contact in 3 years I'd avoided social media. Paranoid about my parents spreading Jade's lie, but kept the same email address. His email apologized for the past 3 years and asked for my contact info to reconnect, providing his own in case I wanted to reach out. He explained that Jade, now on her deathbed with pancreatic cancer, had confessed to her father that she lied about the assault. My uncle told my parents, prompting them to reach out. Jade's story was grim. After taking my college fund, she didn't pursue her master's. Instead, she took a gap year, traveling the world to find herself, spending lavishly. She returned a year and a half ago, having burned through most of the money. She asked my parents for more, but my uncle threatened to cut her off if she took it, so she gave up on college, unable to afford it without working. She bought an apartment and lived beyond her means, still jobless. About a year ago, she found work, but then got diagnosed with cancer, forcing her to quit and sell her apartment to cover medical costs. Her condition has worsened over 8 months, and she's unlikely to survive. Reading this, I felt a grim satisfaction, not because of her illness, but because her reckless choices led to her downfall. She didn't need enemies, she was her own worst one. I debated reconnecting with my parents and discussed it with my roommates, revealing the truth about why I was kicked out. I'd only told them about disagreements before, but now shared how Jade's lie led to my exile, my parents' betrayal, and their threats to ruin me. My friends were shocked and advised against forgiving my parents, urging me to speak out about the truth. They felt I'd lived in fear for 3 years over a lie, losing so much, and deserved to reclaim my story. I decided to tell my parents I planned to go public with the truth, not to ask permission but to inform them. I had screenshots of my dad's email confirming Jade's lie, which I could post online. I texted my dad's number, stating my intent. He, my mom, and my uncle began blowing up my phone, begging me not to post because Jade was suffering and had received her karma. They argued her reputation would be ruined and that I could return home without explaining my absence, as if no one would question it. They were right that I couldn't just reappear without explanation, but I didn't want to return to that city anyway. I missed my friends and supportive relatives who deserved the truth. My family's relentless calls were the only thing holding me back. Update 1, I did it after much thought and consulting my friends, who reiterated that Jade and my family stole 3 years of my life, forcing me to live in fear despite my innocence. I posted the truth. They and many others felt it was reasonable to speak out, regardless of Jade's condition. Knowing I had support gave me confidence. A week after my original decision, I posted about why I'd been off the grid for 3 years. Friends and relatives reached out, saying they'd missed me and were there for me. They revealed my parents had told them I wanted space to heal from a traumatizing event. So after initial emails in the first months, they stopped trying to contact me. My friends had asked my parents about me, but they never shared my whereabouts. Relatives said they'd waited for me to resurface. It was emotional seeing how no one had forgotten me. Many called Jade shady, saying her lie was low even for her. My parents and uncle have been silent, and I hope they stay out of it. I feel free and unburdened, confident that speaking out was the right choice. Update 2, a couple of days after my post, my parents contacted me, expressing disappointment for not letting sleeping dogs lie. They wanted me to make up an excuse for my 3-year absence to spare Jade, claiming she deserved peace given her condition. Apparently, my post cost her most of her friends and family's support. I was shocked they still prioritized her over me. I told them their apology didn't suffice, that they'd let me down by kicking me out at 18, with no sympathy sending me to a terrible relative, and threatening my reputation. Jade lied and got away with it for 3 years while I suffered. I told them they had no right to expect anything from me, that they should be disappointed in themselves and to never contact me again. I blocked them, something I should have done long ago. Speaking out gave me closure, and I no longer feel pressured by their expectations. Update 3. This weekend, I visited my friends and family after 3 years, bringing my roommates for moral support. They're like brothers now, and I wanted them to meet my old friends. It was the best decision I've made. Everyone's getting along, and my friends were overjoyed to see me. They were offended when I mentioned staying in a hotel, so I'm living with one of them now. My heart is full of joy I can't describe. I've met relatives who've cut off my parents, uncle, and Jade, taking a stand for what's right. It's validating to be surrounded by people who didn't forget me and love me more than my parents do. You asked if you were wrong to expose Jade's lie despite her being on her deathbed. Based on your story, I don't think you were wrong. Jade's false accusation cost you 3 years of your life, your college fund, and your relationships with family and friends. You were forced to live in fear, cut off from everyone, and start over in a difficult environment. Her lie wasn't a minor offense. It had profound, lasting consequences. While her cancer is tragic, it doesn't erase the harm she caused or entitle her to silence your truth. Your parents and uncle's pleas to protect her reputation prioritized her over you, even after her confession, echoing their initial betrayal. Speaking out wasn't about revenge. It was about reclaiming your narrative and letting those who care about you know the truth. Your friends' and relatives' support validates this choice, and the closure you found shows it was necessary for your healing. You deserve to live free of the fear and shame imposed on you, and exposing the truth was a reasonable step toward that. This situation resonates with other experiences you've shared, like standing up to family members who wronged you or setting boundaries after being mistreated, as seen in your past conversations about your brother, sister, or others. Your decision to speak out aligns with a pattern of prioritizing your dignity and well-being, which is commendable. If you're still grappling with guilt or considering next steps, focusing on the supportive community, you're rebuilding and maintaining those boundaries seems like a solid path forward. Reflecting on the whirlwind of emotions that have defined my journey these past 3 years, I find myself overwhelmed by a profound sense of liberation mixed with lingering shadows of betrayal. When I first hit post on that truth-revealing update, my heart raced with a cocktail of fear and defiance. Fear, because for so long I'd been conditioned to hide in the shadows, silenced by the weight of Jade's lie and my family's complicity. Defiance, because reclaiming my narrative felt like breaking free from invisible chains that had bound me since I was just 18, a young man thrust into exile, stripped of my future, my friends, and even my sense of self-worth. The relief that washed over me afterward was almost tangible, like exhaling a breath I'd held for far too long. Tears streamed down my face as messages flooded in from old friends and relatives, each one a reminder that I wasn't forgotten, that my absence had left a void in their lives just as theirs had in mine. It was validating, healing even, to hear them say they'd always sensed something off about Jade's story, that her accusations never quite added up. But beneath that, joy lurks a deep-seated anger, not just at Jade for her selfish fabrication, but at my parents for choosing to believe her without question. How could the people who raised me, who claimed to love me unconditionally, turn their backs so easily, sending me to that wretched great uncle, threatening to destroy my reputation if I dared speak out? It wasn't just abandonment. It was a deliberate erasure of my existence. I grieved the loss of my college dreams, the fund I'd worked toward vanishing into her, reckless adventures, while I toiled in warehouses, my body aching, my spirit bruised. Yet, in that grief, I discovered resilience I never knew I had. Building a new life with my roommates, now brothers in every sense, taught me the value of chosen family, of bonds forged in shared struggles rather than blood. Their unwavering support, urging me to speak my truth, reignited a fire in me that Jade's lie had nearly extinguished. Now, as I reconnect with those who truly care, laughter fills rooms that once echoed with silence. And plans for the future, college applications, career ambitions, feel attainable again. But forgiveness? That's a bridge I'm not ready to cross. My parents' recent disappointment stings, but it pales against the years they stole from me. Jade's illness evokes a reluctant pity. No one deserves such suffering, yet it doesn't absolve her. Her confession came too late, born of a deathbed conscience rather than genuine remorse. If anything, it underscores the injustice. She lived freely on my stolen opportunities while I rebuilt from scraps. Today, I stand taller, empowered by the truth's light, surrounded by love that endured. This chapter closes not with bitterness, but with gratitude for the strength I've gained. Life moves forward, and so do I, unapologetically whole. When I pressed post on the social media update that laid bare the truth about Jade's lie, a storm of emotions surged through me, each one vying for dominance in a heart that had been battered for 3 long years. It was a moment of raw defiance, a declaration that I would no longer be silenced by the weight of a falsehood that had stolen so much from me. My fingers trembled as I typed, not out of doubt, but from the sheer intensity of breaking free from the invisible chains that had bound me since I was 18. The fear was palpable, fear of judgment, of reopening old wounds, of my parents' threats to ruin me if I dared speak out. Yet beneath that fear burned a fire of resolve, a refusal to let Jade's accusation define me any longer. As the post went live, I felt a rush of liberation, like exhaling a breath I'd held since that fateful day when my world turned upside down. It was as if I'd been underwater, gasping for air, and finally broke the surface to breathe again. The aftermath was overwhelming in ways I hadn't anticipated. Messages poured in from friends and relatives I hadn't spoken to in years each. One, a lifeline pulling me back to a world I'd been forcibly cut off from. Reading their words, "We missed you. We never believed her. We're here for you," brought tears to my eyes, not just of relief but of validation. For so long I'd carried the shame of Jade's lie, internalizing the idea that I was somehow tainted, even though I'd done nothing wrong. To hear that others had questioned her story, that they'd sensed her shadiness, was like a balm to wounds I hadn't realized were still so raw. Each message chipped away at the isolation that had defined my existence, reminding me that I wasn't as alone as I'd felt. But even in that joy there was a shadow, an anger that simmered beneath the surface. Not just at Jade but at my parents, who'd chosen her over me without hesitation. That betrayal cuts deeper than I can fully articulate. My parents, the people who were supposed to protect me, to know me better than anyone, believed a lie so heinous it reshaped my entire life. At 18, I was just a kid, full of dreams about college, about building a future. They didn't just take that away, they obliterated it, handing my college fund to Jade as if my aspirations were disposable. The memory of that morning when Jade's screams filled our living room and my parents' eyes avoided mine still haunts me. I can still feel the sting of their silence as I pleaded my innocence. The way they treated me like a criminal before I'd even had a chance to defend myself. Being dragged to my room, locked away like a prisoner in my own home, it wasn't just punishment, it was erasure. They sent me to my great-uncle in Iowa, a man whose cruelty was matched only by his disdain for me, knowing full well I despised him. They threatened to ruin my reputation if I didn't vanish, forcing me to sever ties with everyone I loved. That loss of my family, my friends, my sense of belonging was a grief I carried silently, a weight that grew heavier with each passing day. Living with my great-uncle was a daily exercise in survival. His taunts, his anger, his constant reminders that I was a burden, it chipped away at my spirit. I'd lie awake at night, replaying the accusation, wondering what I could have done differently to make my parents believe me. The worst part? Knowing that Jade was out there, living freely on the money meant for my education, while I was exiled, scraping by in a world that felt foreign and hostile. My college acceptance letter, once a symbol of hope, became a cruel reminder of what I'd lost. I'd worked so hard for that opportunity, only to watch it slip away because of a lie. The injustice of it burned, fueling a quiet rage that I buried under the need to keep moving forward. But in that darkness, I found unexpected light. My roommates, who started as co-workers and became my brothers, were my salvation. We were 3 young men, all struggling, all carrying our own burdens, but together we built something real. Our late-night talks, sharing stories of our pasts and dreams for the future, gave me a sense of belonging I hadn't felt since leaving home. They didn't know the full truth at first. How could I tell them I'd been accused of something so vile? But their acceptance gave me the courage to keep going. When I finally landed that warehouse job, despite its grueling hours and meager pay, it felt like a victory. Moving out of my great-uncle's house, even to a cramped apartment with 2 near strangers, was like reclaiming a piece of myself. We'd laugh over cheap takeout, plan our next steps, and slowly, I began to rebuild. Those early days, though exhausting, taught me resilience. I learned that I could start over, that I wasn't defined by Jade's lie or my parents' betrayal. The decision to go public with the truth wasn't made lightly. For 3 years, I'd lived in fear, paranoid that any misstep could bring my parents' threats to fruition. Even as I settled into my new life, found better jobs and dreamed of college again, that fear lingered like a shadow. When my dad's email arrived, revealing Jade's confession, it was both a relief and a fresh wound. She'd lied, just as I'd known, but her confession came not from remorse, but from the edge of death. Pancreatic cancer had ravaged her, and while I wouldn't wish that suffering on anyone, I couldn't help but feel a grim satisfaction. Not at her illness, but at the irony. She'd squandered my college fund on a lavish gap year, chasing a fantasy of finding herself, only to return with nothing but debts and regrets. Her reckless choices had led her to this point, and while I pitied her pain, I couldn't forgive the years she stole from me. Telling my roommates the full story was a turning point. For so long I'd carried the shame alone, afraid to voice the truth even to those closest to me. But their reaction, shock, anger on my behalf, and unwavering support, gave me the strength to confront my past. They urged me to speak out, not out of vengeance, but because I deserved to reclaim my narrative. The idea of going public terrified me, yet it also felt like the only way to shed the weight of those 3 years. When I texted my dad, telling him I planned to post the truth, I wasn't asking for permission. I was reclaiming my voice. Their desperate pleas to stay silent, to protect Jade's reputation because she was suffering enough, only deepened my resolve. Why should her suffering matter more than mine? She'd faced no consequences for her lie, while I'd lost everything. My parents' continued prioritization of her, even after her confession, was a final betrayal, a reminder that their loyalty was never truly mine. The moment I posted, I felt a weight lift. The response was overwhelming. Friends and relatives reaching out, some crying as they told me how much they'd missed me, others apologizing for not pushing harder to find me. Learning that my parents had told everyone I needed space to heal from a traumatizing event was infuriating, yet it explained why. Contact had stopped after those first few months my friends had tried. My relatives had waited, but my parents' lies kept us apart. Knowing that so many people had questioned Jade's story, that they'd found her shady, was a validation I hadn't realized I needed. It wasn't just about clearing my name, it was about being seen, truly seen for the first time in years. Reconnecting with my old friends and supportive relatives has been like rediscovering a part of myself I thought was lost forever. This weekend, when I visited them with my roommates, was a blur of joy and laughter. Staying at a friend's house, surrounded by people who welcomed me back with open arms, filled a void I'd carried for too long. My roommates fit right in, their presence a reminder of the family I've built through shared struggles. Seeing my relatives take a stand, cutting off my parents, uncle, and Jade, was a powerful affirmation that truth matters. They didn't just welcome me back, they rallied around me, choosing justice over blind loyalty. But forgiveness remains elusive. My parents' recent disappointment, their insistence that I should've let sleeping dogs lie to spare Jade, feels like a fresh wound. They still prioritize her even now when her lie has been exposed. Their apology was hollow, a belated attempt to salvage a relationship they shattered. I told them they had no right to expect anything from me, that their betrayal at 18, kicking me out, sending me to a cruel relative, threatening my future, was unforgivable. Blocking them was liberating, a boundary I should have set years ago. Jade's illness evokes a reluctant pity. No one deserves such a fate. But her confession, timed with her mortality, feels less like remorse and more like a final act of self-preservation. She lived freely on my stolen dreams, while I rebuilt from nothing. Her suffering doesn't erase that. Today, I stand taller, empowered by the truth and surrounded by love that endured despite the years apart. My work in sales, my plans to reapply to college, my life with my roommates, all are testaments to my resilience. The guilt I once felt, the fear that I was somehow wrong for speaking out, has faded. I deserve to be heard, to live unburdened by lies. This chapter closes not with bitterness, but with gratitude for the strength I've gained, the bonds I've forged, and the future I'm building. I'm not looking back, not because I don't care, but because I finally found peace in moving forward.